Good morning. As we gather today, we acknowledge that we are on the ground that was originally inhabited by Namkeg ancestors. We recognize their stewardship of the earth and the continued stewardship by Wampanoag communities along this coast. My name is Rachel Allen. As Karen said, I come from the Nez Perce tribe, and I am currently the Curatorial Mellon Fellow at PEM. And that amazing program in my paper is titled From the Margins to the Matrix, T.C. Cannon and the Printmaking Renaissance. So this paper examines Waiting for the Bus, Anadarko Princess from 1977, pictured here, a 7-color lithograph by T.C. Cannon made in collaboration with the Tamarind Institute, University of New Mexico's highly regarded lithography workshop. While attending to the aesthetics and content, this paper locates Cannon's print at the intersection between native art and the American printmaking renaissance of the 20th century. Okay, so first, let's talk about printmaking and give you kind of a few terms so that we can all be on the same page. So a print is an impression made by any method involving transfer from one surface to another, so your fingerprint, your footprint. But in the fine art context, it could be any of these things. So in printmaking, the matrix, which I use in my title, is whatever you use to hold the image on which the ink is applied to make the print. So whether it be a metal plate in etching, a stone for lithography, a frame screen mesh and screen printing, like we saw with Jared Yazzie last night, or a wood block in woodcut. And then in addition is a total number of impressions from a given matrix. This is a set of identical prints that are signed and numbered, typically written as a fraction. For example, like 66/125, which is the print that's in the exhibition. That's the numbered print of the one in the exhibition. The number to the right of the slash indicates the edition size. In this case, 125 prints were made, while the figure to the left is the individual print's number, which is 66. And though there are multiples, each print in an edition is traditionally considered an original piece of art. So, more specifically now to lithography. Okay, so lithography is based on the fact that lithography is based on the fact that grease and water don't mix. So the printing process uses a flat stone, like this one, specifically like a limestone, usually from Bavaria, or a metal plate, which is usually like a ball-grained aluminum. So on this, you create image areas using a greasy substance. Like anything greasy will work, but they make special wet and dry medias to draw with. And so the ink adheres to that, the greasy drawing, and then the non-image areas are made ink repellent through a chemical process. And so they love water but hate grease. The printing surface is kept wet, as you see here. And so that when the roller is charged with oil-based ink and is rolled over the surface, and the ink will only stick to the image, which is grease receptive, and it won't stick to the rest of the stone, which is just water-loving. So it's kind of magical, which is another reason I love it. And then the paper is placed on that after you put all the ink on, and then it's run through the press. So now let's talk about the so-called printmaking renaissance. What's that? So after the war years, rapid development and growth of printmaking followed the 50s and 60s and reached its stride in the golden 70s. Much of this resurgence focused on lithography, and so I'm going to focus on that history a little bit today. Before this, there are very few people skilled in lithography in the United States, and many actually had to go to Europe to learn any sort of complex lithography techniques. And since there are so few professional printers, a lot of them didn't have the ability or really the patience to work with artists. But as early as 1922, Joseph Pennell established a lithography workshop at the Art Students League in New York. And then later in 1948, with Will Barnett's assistance, Robert Blackburn, who is pictured here to your left, established his workshop where artists and students could work together and share what they learned. On a fellowship to study in France, hoping to sort of learn some art. The printers were super guarded about their secrets and definitely would not share with an African American. One of the guiding principles of his shop has been to give opportunities to students of all races, nationalities, and financial status to learn lithography and to have access to a competent printer. So Blackburn's training at the Harlem Community Workshop, his awareness of the Works Progress Administration print projects, which actually revived color lithography in the US, and his experience at the Stanley William Hayter's Atelier 17 really showed him the benefits of this sort of workshop atmosphere. June Wayne, pictured to the right, founded Tamarind Lithography Workshop in 1960. Tanya Grossman's Universal Limited Art Editions opened the same year, and Ken Tyler's Gemini GEL opened in 1965. Like Tyler, many Tamarind-trained printers established shops throughout the country, such as the Hollander Workshop in New York. By 1973, the art critic and historian Diane Kelder would state that print studios have been at the forefront of the decentralization of the art world. So at the same time that all of this was happening and fine art printmaking was sort of becoming well established in the United States, large editions by professional copyists were being made to satisfy marketplace demands for like famous international artists. And these types of practices greatly impacted the market value for graphics made by sort of lesser known American artists, leading to the Print Council of America to establish criteria for what makes an original print, and we sort of feel those reverberations still today. So in the 70s, in reaction to that, some dealers began to provide these like certificates of authenticity with pieces they sold to reassure their customers that yes, this is a real print. And then workshops also started producing full documentation on how the print was made, which is how I was able to learn a lot more about this Anadarko print from the Tamarind archives. So prices during that decade began to rise, and promoting print buying as an investment tool kind of took hold at that point. And then by the 80s, many artists were making prints expressing issues of ethnicity, race, gender, politics, and appropriation and serial imagery could be seen in these prints that sort of, once again, challenge notions of originality. And a lot of these, some of these sort of issues were actually foreshadowed, I feel like, in Cannon's work. So Tamarind, a little bit more specifically, because that's where Anadarko Princess was made. It was created in 1970 as a division of the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, but it started as Tamarind Lithography Workshop by June Wayne in Los Angeles as a nonprofit to rescue the art of lithography. And so, as I mentioned before, people felt like it needed to be rescued in the United States and preserved that way. Tamarind has since been a major influence in the resurgence of lithography internationally and a major player in the printmaking renaissance. Many of those prominent artists at the time and since have collaborated at the Tamarind Institute, including, I mean, the list is so large, but like Jim Dine, Louise Nevelson, Ed Ruchet, Richard Diebenkorn, Kiki Smith, like so many. But also, a lot of Native artists worked there and promoted their work through Tamarind in the 70s and 80s. So besides Cannon, Fritz Scholder, Jean Quick-to-See Smith, and then actually Lynn Allen became a Tamarind Master Printer in 1983 and is now a professor at the College of Fine Arts at Boston University. So now like printmaking and Cannon. Okay, so though Cannon worked mostly in oil and acrylic, as you saw earlier when Karen was talking about his canvases, he was very familiar with printmaking from his studies at Central State University, now the University of Central Oklahoma. So in the early 70s, he completed works like Big Soldier and Zero Hero in school. And then starting in 1975, Cannon's Madison Avenue Gallery representation, the Aberbox, arranged for him to collaborate with master Japanese woodcutter and printer to produce color wood block prints based on the images of several of his major canvases. And those can be seen in the exhibition, and they're quite stunning. So before his death, he was able to sign those, even though some of them were printed posthumously. The Aberbox also arranged for the production of Waiting for the Bus, Anadarko Princess, and half of the edition was actually used as a fundraiser for the Santa Fe Opera, which is something the Aberbox were very involved in. So now the print. Okay. Waiting for the Bus, Anadarko Princess is a lithograph, not a woodcut like I was previously discussing. Cannon worked with Tamarind Master Printer Lynn Baker at the Tamarind Institute to create the matrix and the edition. According to the printer's notes and correspondence between Cannon and the assistant director of Tamarind, Judith Booth at the time, the artist worked solely with Baker while at Tamarind in January of 1977. And then later he signed the prints in March and they were distributed in April. Baker assisted Cannon to draw the images on aluminum plates and stones. Both were used. It was a 6-run, 7-color process. The artist did not have much experience with the medium, even though a lithograph from his college years has recently resurfaced. Cannon did sometimes draw with similar cross-hatching and cross-contour, so I feel like a lot of the line drawing on there is something Cannon actually did on the stone or the plate. But the touche wash, which is sort of those beautiful reticulations in the blue and the purple and the green, and you see that really interesting wash, that is very, very hard to do. And so that had to have been expertly done by the master printer and not done by a novice. Lithography is kind of hard. The first lithograph I ever made actually turned out completely black because I etched it incorrectly. So. The printer's notes also indicate that there were no additions or deletions of the drawing on the stones, further proving the expertise of the master printer and of Cannon. And Cannon chose the colors and approved the proofs, but the printer processed the matrices and produced the addition. So he was very involved in the making of this print. Unlike others, it's not based on a painting, but we have seen a lot of preliminary drawings, and it still displays Cannon's signature moves, his historical mashups, his classic style portraiture with abstracted background, his pop art colors, and a love for his people that transcends time. Cannon was a lead proponent in what was deemed the new Indian art movement that rose out of the socially and politically turbulent 1960s and 70s. Founded in 1962, the Institute for American Indian Arts, also known as IAIA, gave an opportunity for Native Americans from communities across the United States to make work in new ways, breaking away from the narrow styles of non-Native instructors such as Dorothy Dunn's studio style and the Oscar B. Jacobson's promotion of the Kiowa Six. IAIA became a hub for producing a new generation of Native artists. Cannon attended IAIA from 1964 to 1966 and was very aware of the studio style, but with his classmates revolutionized Native art, taking inspiration from the Western canon and the larger art world, especially, as we've heard discussed already, Vincent van Gogh, Matisse, Rauschenberg, like all those people. Cannon combined his worldview with the abstract styles of the day and the burgeoning move to figuration. And he was also working in parallel with other artists working in figuration like Alice Neal and David Hockney. T.C. Cannon was born in 1946 in Gracemont, Oklahoma, only 8 miles north of Anadarko. As a teenager, Cannon sold his work at the Indian Arts and Crafts Co-op inside the Southern Plains Indian Museum in Anadarko, and as an adult, the museum included him in a major traveling exhibition. Since 1935, the American Indian Exposition has been held in Anadarko, which is one of the oldest intertribal gatherings in the United States, sponsored by 15 tribes. This gathering selects a Miss American Indian Exposition every year, which could be what the title Anadarko Princess refers to, which is often the nickname for this position. The photographer Horace Pula, also Kiowa and from Anadarko, depicted some of these princesses when documenting parades in the 1940s and 50s. The American Indian Exposition, which continues annually every August, is such a large event that Cannon more than likely knew many of the people that participated throughout his life. The rise in popularity of this event was even featured in the August 1976 issue of Southern Living magazine. Waiting for the Bus, Anadarko Princess depicts a woman waiting for a bus, just like the figures in his painting Mama and Papa Have the Going Home Shiprock Blues from 1966. But instead of in the location of New Mexico, the woman is situated in Oklahoma, where Cannon is from, sporting her Southern Plains wear with elk-tooth dress and tailor earrings, concha belt. She's waiting for the bus, so could she be participating in a powwow, such as the American Indian Exposition? Following in Cannon's style of showcasing historical mashups with an indigenous nonlinear sense of time, the woman also holds a purse and umbrella. Cannon has women with umbrellas in other work, such as Grandmother Justing Father and the Washita River Runs Through Ribbon Lake, as a parasol is a welcome protection from a day in the sun in the Southwest. The mashup continues into the art historical with the single woman posed with a parasol, a common trope from European paintings in the 17th and 19th centuries. But this woman does not have a passive pose, but is sitting in kind of a particular, if not peculiar way. Is she poised for action? She does not have the luxury of a leisurely afternoon. She looks like she has somewhere to go. Cannon could have also posed her to sit with her knees shifted to the right and head tilted just so to recall the Madonnas in religious paintings of the late medieval period to the Renaissance. A Madonna is a depiction of the Virgin Mary in Christian iconography, who is often shown wearing a veil or blue mantle covering the head, just as this Anadarko Princess is sheltered by a blue parasol. The Virgin typically wears a red garment, and Canon's character has red around her waist. Her halo is traced in the sky, connected by the clouds and treetops, and the stars on her sleeves perform double duty in Christian and native symbolism. Finally, the bright yellow that surrounds her in the desert, sand, and on her clothes just shines like gold leaf with hints of red outlines, kind of acting like the bold underlayer showing through. Canon could have used this trope before. He did use this trope before in Cloud Madonna from 1975, which was discussed earlier. Many of his depictions reveal a deep adoration and respect for women as the knowledge bearers and agents of cultural renewal for the community, using a mix of Western and native signifiers to reinforce this message. Surrounding the representational style of the figure is a more abstracted background with a landscape reduced to horizontal bands of color with a few cartoon-like trees and clouds as accents. The bench, which holds the color of the paper, is abstracted by extending past the picture plane, which also exaggerates the expansive environment. It could reference architectural devices in depictions of the Madonna, or simply mimic the horizontal color fields that were in vogue previously. Since the sitter is in a pastoral landscape, perhaps like in the rest on the flight to Egypt, is she in exile as well? In the biblical story, Mary and Joseph fled to Egypt because King Herod was killing infants where they lived. Native peoples have been exiled and displaced from their lands, and most did not have the fortunate outcome of the Holy Family refugees who returned to their homelands. Is this reference to larger movement of peoples, or just on her own bus travels to a powwow, or a bigger punctuation on the trauma and diaspora of Native people? She waits for the bus, this new mode that replaces the horse, which is a portal for travel on and off the reservation. With its link to Western expansion and an issue of concern in the civil rights movement just 10 years prior, the absence of the bus might leave the viewer pondering these complex histories, but ultimately adds a layer of tension that contrasts the bright colors and cartoonish landscape. It's just back to this one. Canon, experienced with color as he was, utilized his 7 colors for the print most effectively. He divides the background into thirds with a yellow, green, and pink, and then he breaks up the color with lines of the white bench and to add a nice rhythm as your eye moves up and down the page, as well as to sort of calm down the colorful composition. The woman is sandwiched between blues, as if the 2 shadows are framing her, and the curve of the umbrella and horseshoe of clouds halo the special woman. A pop of red pattern on her clothes becomes intensified by the presence of green, its complement, behind, but is balanced by the charming pink sky. She wears purple, which serves as a middle ground in the temperature, but has more symbolic meaning as purple for Canon, because it appears by name in his poetry so many times. Though Canon elevated this woman to the status of a Madonna to underscore women as powerful culture bearers, this may also actually be a specific person. According to the lecture given last October by Joyce Cannon Yee, Canon's sister and executor of his estate, she gives another story. This woman named Mary, actually, whose unrequited love troubled Canon before he left for Vietnam. Though she married another, she requested to be buried next to him, and Canon's father agreed, and that's where they both lay to rest. Just as Canon worked at Tamarind, other artists worked at many other shops, such as Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop in New York. Not only was the potential for commercial value of multiples realized, but the influx of print shops changed the conversation in the art world as shops promoted the voices of more diverse artists such as Helen Frankenthaler, Jacob Lawrence, Romar Bearden, and others. In the 20th century, artists started using different materials to make art. In response to historical media hierarchies, artists took up printmaking to push the social and aesthetic boundaries. Artists were attracted to the attributes that printmaking offered, including its graphic nature, democratic tendencies, social flexibility, range of techniques, potential for multiples, and political history. In championing these other media, they were presencing divergent behavior and ways of being. They presenced themselves as equals in a larger art world, problematized issues of authenticity in their own identity and in the printmaking, and were able to get their work disseminated through more print editions. Thank you.